All right, guys, so when we're trying to debug this kind of a problem, we're going to start with making sure that we don't have any movement on any of the bearings and that they're not making any noise. And I'm just going to show you, before we talk about the actual problem, the tests that were done, right? So normally what you'll find is if you grab these wheels in the 9 and the 3 o'clock position, or you grab them in the 12 or the 6 o'clock position, and you try to wiggle them, if there's a problem with the bearing that's gone very far, you'll be able to feel a little bit of movement. We don't have any movement at all with this guy. So this guy's just this wheel off the ground with the parking brake off. The other thing you can do is you can spin the wheel around. This is the rear wheel, so it's not going to have any drag from the transmission. And you can tell if you hear anything. And the other test you can do is as you turn it around, you can take your bare hand, you can put it on the spring of the strut, and you can feel any vibrations that tend to be, if there's a problem with the bearings, sometimes that'll work its way up through the suspension system and you'll be able to detect it that way. The last thing you can do would try to figure out where this noise is coming from is to go feel the tire, and what you're looking for are any bulges on the tire or any depressions on the tire. And as part of debugging this particular problem on this car, I've done that to both rear wheels, and there's nothing wrong with either of them. There's no noise, there's no vibration, there's no abnormalities on the tire, and there's no play in the wheel in either direction. So now we're going to move it on to the front as we try to track down this noise. All right, guys, we're going to do the same test here in the front. It's the same. We've got it jacked up a little bit off the ground. We've got the transmission in neutral. We're going to do that same kind of wiggle test at 12 and 6, and we're going to do that same kind of wiggle test at 9 and 3. And again, we don't have any movement. Now you want to do this with only one wheel up. If you do both wheels up, you'll get some movement because of the tie rods and the steering linkage. So you want to keep one wheel on the ground. So once again, we don't have anything there. Once again, we've checked the tires, and we don't have any cupping, and we don't have any bulging. So this is a very anomalous problem. Now the driver believes that the sound is coming from the front, and it's a very loud roaring noise. It sounds very much like a wheel hub bearing that's gone out. This one as well, just like the rears. So we spin it around, and we can't spin it too much because of the drag of the disc brakes. It's a little bit worse than what you'd have in the rear drums. There's no vibration whatsoever, nothing. So all indications would be that this is also not the problem. However, when we go to the passenger side and do these same tests, all these tests pass, but we do feel a little thumping through the spring on the passenger side. So that's the only thing that we've got as a clue. And the purpose of the video here, not just to show you to change the hubs, but to zero on this kind of problem. And I'll put up a list of all the tests that we were done here. But basically the driver says that when they're driving down the road, if they veer into the right lane, the sound gets better. If they veer into the left lane, the sound gets worse. Another indication that it's a wheel hub problem. And the other thing that we did as a test to kind of confirm wheel hub or tire, we rotated these tires. Normally, if it's a tire, the problem will follow the tire. What happened here is that when we did the rotation, the sound stayed in the front and got louder. If you rotate the tires again back, it stayed in the front and goes back to the way it was. And that again indicates a bearing inside of a wheel hub because of the different wear pattern on the tire. So let's get into replacing. All right, guys, after you get the wheel off, you're going to take a 3/8" Allen head key, and you're going to remove the slide pin bolts that are holding the caliper on. Going to loosen them up here with this ratchet, top and bottom. These ones on here, fortunately, are not on too tight because we recently did brake pads on this car. After we get them loosened up here off the rotor. Once you get them loosened up with the ratchet, you should be able to work them the rest of the way out. We did test that nothing's binding. Okay, and then we're going to just bungee this guy so that we can work on bearing and wheel hub assembly. Rotor comes just right off like that. When you set this guy down, kind of put him like that so that it'll keep the concrete and any rocks and anything from hitting the other side of the rotor surface, particularly if you've got a new one on there. All right, the first thing we're going to do here, we've got several Torx T55 bolts holding this that are accessed through the larger of these 3 holes. I'm going to work some PB Blaster in here just to give it time, because this is the original wheel hub on this vehicle. This is a 2004 Cavalier, and I think we're going to have a fight getting these guys out regardless. So we're going to use like a T55 bit like this. And we're just going to work it in to make sure it's biting into the surface really good. And then we're realizing that our little 3/8 adapter has walked on us, or we just forgot to bring it over. Sorry about that, guys. Then I'm just going to lean into this guy and try to work these out. Some of them are going to be really stuck on there, since, like I said, this has been on here since 2004. So I'm just going to work at each one and keep rotating around until we get somewhere. One of them is going to be weak. So this guy gave in on us. That's one. So you can see if you zoom in here, it's one of these star pattern bolts. I'm not a fan of these because they can strip. In there, some of this penetrating fluid to go in. We'll come back when we get some problems. We ended up finally getting this to work off very slowly by taking a manual wrench, getting a pipe extension on here. Finally got enough where I think that we can finish it up. It's kind of surprising that we had better luck with the manual tool than the electric. That one. And again, we're trying to make sure though that there's no stripping on this. If they get these teeth in there and they get stripped, then it's a real problem. Let's see if we can get this guy off the same way. All right. All right, now that we got these bolts off, make sure that they're all okay. That was actually the easy part. The hard part's going to be getting the hub to let go. And we can get some type of chisel tool in there to help prise it off. Take a look from that angle, and you can see this seam opening up here. Now I'm going to take a tool like this, wedge it in, off, and step up to a larger tool. Doing the same thing. Can never have too much PB Blaster. All right, so we've gotten, you can see we've got a very good gap going on this side. All right, now at that point, I feel like it's loose enough that I'm going to disconnect the point. This is a 29 millimeter. Just using a little magnet here to work the washer off. Now, got it off. You can see there's a lot of corrosion on here. A lot of corrosion that we're going to need to clean up inside here before we put the new one on. Now we still spin this, and it seems okay. But we know it's not the tires, and the sound is distinctly a bearing problem. So it's going to either be this one or the one on the other side, and whenever I replace a bearing, I replace them on both sides anyway. So we're going to go ahead and do this one, and then we're going to do the one in the other area here. There's a lot of pitting on this old steering knuckle. We're not going to be able to get it all off, but we're going to get enough off so that we can do the repair. Also gone over the bolts rather, with the wire wheel to make those go in easier. All right, so we're going to replace this with an AC Delco Advantage part. Just showing you that I ended up ordering two, but I got two different ones. 513017KA and 503017K. It looks like they wrote the A on there. This is really a K because it's got a different GM number. This is the older discontinued one, 193-12379 from GM. The current one is GM 19385575. This number, without the A, is the same number you'd find for this particular vehicle, a Cavalier or a Pontiac Sunfire, from Timken or Moog would also use that same number. The GM part, the genuine GM part, is about twice as much. You can see here we got from 2004 to now, so it's a good chance you would have got that. But for a vehicle this old, an AC Delco Advantage part or a Timken, I'd recommend, whichever you can get cheaper. So we're going to go ahead and put the older one on this side. What you'll get in the box is brand new wheel hub assembly. There will be these seals attached. Now let me tell you something about these seals. And then there'll be a new axle nut, a new 29 millimeter axle nut. So if you have a 97 and up, and the reason I say this video is 97 and up, these are not used. But if you have a 96 and older, this guy here goes in the back of the steering knuckle. Gets put in, it's a dust shield. And the rubber O-ring would end up going along this piece here. I don't know why, but starting in 97, GM stopped using these. As you saw, the old one didn't have it, so we're not going to use it either. The other thing I'll tell you about the installation before we pop it on is two things. I like to use anti-seize only around the bearing itself so we don't go through what we just went through. So just around the bearing. We don't put any of this on the screw or the bolts, because we want those torqued down, because those three bolts are the only thing besides the axle nut that's holding all this stuff on. So we don't want to do anything with that type of material there. And then on the inside, what we're going to do is we're going to give it a little bit of a squirt of fluid film just around these splines and this part here, just to ease assembly. And then what we're also going to do is just a little bit on the flange area with fluid film. Don't have to get it everywhere. But again, this is going to help with getting it back off if we ever have to do this again. I'm just going to line up our first bolt and work them in. So I'm going to tighten these guys up, and then when we get ready to torque them down, once you get it started in partly by a hand wrench, whoops, you can finish it the rest of the way with electric tools. The key is just to do it evenly all the way around, because you want this guy to sit nice and even. Once we get all these sides bottomed out, then we'll torque it down to 70 foot-pounds. All right. And we'll do that starting with the one we left off here. Then we'll put on a washer and our new nut, but we won't torque this guy down until we get it under pressure from the weight of the vehicle. So what we'll do here is going to go ahead and do some more fluid film around this flange area for the rotor. We'll get the rotor on, we'll put the caliper back on, put the wheel back on, and we'll give it a road test. Even though we suspect it's the one on the passenger side, we're going to replace them in pairs. Just make sure this one's okay before we move on to the next. All right, guys, we're going to torque these, or we have torqued these lug nuts to 100 foot-pounds. And now we're going to do the center axle nut to 148 foot-pounds. The way you get access to this is there's usually a little cap here on the factory wheels, and you can just take a small flathead screwdriver and gently work it off the hub. All right, we're done on one side. Let's do the other. All right, guys, we went ahead and changed the other one. Didn't expect it to get rid of the noise, but we're not trying to change them in pairs. This one on the passenger side, the tire is fine, same test. We're not having any high points or low points. We don't have any movement at 9 and 3. We don't have any movement at 12 and 6. But this is the one where if you grab onto the spring under here and you turn it, you do hear a little wubba, 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 wubba. There's like a little sound. You know, another way you could do this if you have trouble feeling it is you can take a long piece of metal, you can put it on the end of the spring, and you can still feel that vibration coming from the spring into your hand with a piece of metal. So we think this is the one. Left a couple of bolts in here, but we're going to go ahead and finish pulling the tire off. I'm not going to show pulling the caliper and off all that because you guys know what that is. We'll just get it right down the hub and we'll get ready to yank it and reinstall it. All right, guys, we're on the other side here. We're hoping this is the one that works for us. I'm going to take a wire brush. I'm just going to get a flashlight up here because it's gotten kind of overcast. Not sure if you guys can see anymore. And I'm just going to work this guy in here to get some of the debris around from the flange seal between the hub and the steering knuckle. Mostly so that we can be sure that we have a good shot of our PB blaster maybe oozing its way in there. So we're going to put this like we did on the other side on all three of these bolts. We're also going to put it on the back side of these bolts just to kind of help us out. And let that soak in. So just like last time, we'll be taking our T55. Find out where it went. We're taking our T55 like to start at the one on top. We'll be hammering him in just to make sure he's got a good seating surface. I'm going to try to break the torque initially with a regular manual wrench, just given the experience we had on the other side with corrosion. That one, you know, it's fortunate to not be in a northeastern state. I know those of you who may be watching this from a northeastern state, if you even have a Cavalier that's still on the road, which right there would be something to probably make a video out of, because it's got to be an endangered species by now, anywhere that they put salt on the roads. But at least this is doable. I would imagine it's less doable if you're from those states. Alright, this one didn't pop on us, but it is turning. Alright, so I'm not necessarily going to show you getting the rest of these out. We'll get those bolts out and come back, but I do want to show you one thing. If you were to have one of these get stripped, a tool I keep handy is one of these little 6-inch pipe wrenches, because they happen to fit back here. You know, pipe wrenches grab like a mother. You can get this guy worked onto one of these if it strips. Get yourself a piece of, you know, pipe extension, and at least will give you a chance to get it off if it's stripped. That has worked for me at least once, so it's a tip worth sharing. All right, let's go ahead and continue getting these bolts off, and then we'll come back. All right, guys, just like the other side, we're going to work it loose. This one we're not even having to use the chisel on. So we're just making sure that we've got a good break of this seam. And then we'll go ahead and pull our axle nut off. There was quite a bit of corrosion on the axle shaft here, so we PB blasted that too. We're going to let that soak in. We'll spin this 29mm nut off, and then we'll finish removing this guy. This guy's going to come out a lot easier. And we'll find out if we fix this. All right, guys, we got our old nut off that we're going to discard. That guy is moving okay. Finish getting our... Actually, I just realized we didn't take our washer off. Let's get him out of there. The washer, of course, we reuse. Corrosion that we're going to have to clean up. And I'm satisfied we just fixed this problem. So guys, that kind of whoop-a, whoop-a, whoop-a that you could feel when you held up here and had the tire spinning, I can feel that right now. It doesn't make a sound per se, but I can feel like there's something inside the bearing. So I'm pretty sure this wheel hub is the one that was generating that noise. So we'll open up our KA one. Again, just like last time, this seal, both of these seals, let's get this guy opened up here so you can see what I'm talking about, and we'll come back after we clean everything up. There's our new nut that we'll be using. Again, these seals, one of these is pounded into the other side of the steering knuckle. This one would have went around the bearing insert. Is only used on 1996 and older J cars. 97 and up, like this 2004 all the way to the last one in 2005, does not use either of those seals. But they're in the package because you don't know which kind of car you're using, right? So here's our new one. We're ready to install it. Another thing I'll say to you is, if you had bought the actual GM one rather than this AC Delco Advantage series, so Advantage is like a lower cost type of product, right? Made in China. I hate seeing this made in China stuff, but the owner of this vehicle wanted to go less expensive, so that's the route to go. Something like this will run you probably around 50, 60 bucks. It's about what you could get for a Timken Same part number, 513017K, without the A at the end. The A at the end is the AC Delco one. This GM one here is for this AC Delco Advantage one. I'll roll something in the bottom of the video and also in the description for the GM one. It'll run you about $100. That one won't come with any wheel studs. And so you'll have to take your old ones and pound them out. Right? So you'll put an old lug nut on here and you pound them out unless you have a press to press them out. But these lower cost ones that are more meant for a DIYer come with the wheel studs already installed. So that's something else to take note of. All right, so like last time, we're going to get in here, we're going to clean all this up, and we'll come back right before we do the final. Guys, we've got this all cleaned up. I mean, you know, you're not going to get all of it on this kind of old car, right? 2004. There's some pitting on the flange area here of the steering knuckle. You know, we're nice and clean all around where our bolts are going to mate up, but the only way you'd be able to fix this is to replace the whole steering knuckle, and I don't think that's necessary for this particular level of corrosion on this particular age car. So let's go ahead and get our new hub in here, just like we did on the other side. We're going to use a couple of different products. We're going to use some fluid film in between where we bolt up, just to try and cut down on some of this in the future. And we're going to get some on the splines and also on the back here. The fluid film, you know, sometimes you can use it as a corrosion preventative, you know, like underneath, but I think it works just great for this kind of application too. And then I'm using anti-seize just on the part of the hub bearing that fits into the machined area here. All right. Now I've also wire brushed off our bolts, and I've just given them a little bit of PB Blaster, something that's a very light oil. You can use this, you can use something else. You don't want to use anti-seize on these bolts because that's all that's holding this together, other than the axle nut itself. So if you've got everything done right, it should go in nice and easy. And just to make sure everything goes in even, we won't tighten that one down until we get this other guy in here. And what we'll do after we get all these in, we'll torque them down just like the other side to 70 foot-pounds. We'll put the wheel back on, we'll torque the lug nuts down to 100 foot-pounds, and then we'll put the hub nut washer. In fact, we'll do that right now before we forget. And we'll get this guy on to 148 foot-pounds, but only after we've got him on the ground where we can get some weight of the vehicle on him. All right, we got this one additional one down here. To get started. Now, fortunately, we lucked out here in the sense that none of these Torx T55 mounting bolts were stripped. That was my primary concern on what could go wrong. That part didn't go wrong. The funny thing is, the one on the other side that was harder to get out was probably still okay. And this one over here that came out the easiest, turns out that I'm very confident is the bad one. All right, so we're just going to go up here, tighten this down, and then we'll put the wheel back on, torque them to 100, 148 on our hub nut, and we'll give it a test drive, and we'll come back and we'll see how it works. That was it. So when you got a situation with a bearing where there's no wobble, and there's no problems with the tires, and you can't really hear anything when you are rolling it, and you can only hear it above 45, 50 miles an hour when you're driving, it's hard to tell the difference between whether it's the bearing or the tire. But that tire rotation change was what really broke us through, and then being able just to hear this little kind of like a rock in here. Dugga, 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 dugga. And that did it for us. If you got some questions or comments on the procedure or what we did here, go ahead and leave a comment below and I'll try to help. I'll put the part numbers and links for what I used, tools and parts-wise, in the description. If you found this useful, go ahead and hit that like button, and as always, thanks for watching.